right. Well, welcome to the Clan Mackay and all those who are going to be watching this Mackay Day video. Just as a way of introduction, I am Hunter Mackay, one of the two Shenehis for the Clan Mackay Society of Scotland. And this is my co-Shenehi, Chris Mackey. Chris?
Hello, kinsmen and clansmen and cousins all across the world. I'm the other Shenanigans to our chief, as Hunter noted, and gathering today virtually to celebrate Clan Mackay Day.
Awesome. So, Chris, just to kind of start the video off, Chris, we decided a couple years ago that October 8th would be Mackay Day. Could you give us a little bit of a background story into why October 8th and why should we do a Mackay Day?
Absolutely. Well, it's with the recommendation we made to our chief, and he sanctioned the notion that on the 8th of October we celebrate us really as a clan. And there's several reasons why. I mean, one is why not have a day that we can celebrate who we are as a people and our heritage. The idea specifically as to how we arrived at that date originated from a suggestion by a author some years ago named Frank Adam, and he wrote a rather authoritative book on the modern iteration of clans. In that, he suggested celebrating as a clan day the anniversary of the date of the earliest known charter recognizing the clan lands, or at least a portion of the traditional territory of a clan. So for us, that is the 8th of October. And the document, the charter in this case, was a charter granted by the Lord of the Isles, the Chief of MacDonald's, to our chief at that time. This would be in the 15th century. The context of the Chief of MacDonald's granting land to the Chief of the Mackays was that the MacDonalds had ambitions for the north of Scotland. They were lords of the Isles, so they ruled the Isles off the coast of Scotland, but they had ambitions to expand their territory. In doing that, initially, they were opposed by the Mackays, and they fought a battle at which we were defeated. But then the Lord of MacDonald's decided, in order to further his ambitions through the north, it would be best to make a friend of his former enemy. And so he had captured our chief during that battle. But what he did in order to ally the Mackays with the MacDonalds was to propose a marriage between our chief and his own sister. And this is not uncommon at that time and for generations afterwards to make those kind of political alliances between families through marriage. So, the modern viewer or reader might conceive of it as a kind of Game of Thrones taking place in the Highlands. So that's what our chief agreed to do. Of course, he was prisoner, so whether there was any kind of duress involved, we can only speculate. But to sweeten the deal, the Lord of the Isles said, well, I will grant you a charter if you marry my sister to particular lands in the north. Now, the Mackays had been in the north, in that country, for some generations already, after they'd been removed by the crown out of Murray and into the far north. So the question might be, well, why would our chief care? He was already living in that area and his people were there too. But at this time, more and more the legal ideas of the Southerners, particularly the English, via the Scots crown, which had already now been, there had been English blood and culture that had been introduced into the Scottish royal family. And with that came ideas from the South, particularly legal ideas. And as it relates to this incident, it's the notion that land was held not in common by a people, which was the Gaelic Highland understanding, but rather land was held on a legal basis by one proprietor, by one owner. And for that, he needed proof of his ownership by having a legal document. So that's what the Lord of the Isles was offering to our chief, was legal proof that, yes, you have title to these portions of the north. And so our chief, again, as I said, agreed to this, agreed to the marriage, and gladly received this charter granting him lands to portions of the North Strathalladale and one other portion in the north. And that's the earliest written legal document we have placing our people there in the north. As I said, historically, we know they were there for generations before that, but this is the first dated legal document recognizing legal title to that portion of Scotland, which is now Mackay country. And in fact, this was such an important document to our people that when our present chief was inaugurated a couple of years ago, the now chief of the MacDonalds attended that inauguration, and as part of the ceremony read out an English translation of that Latin charter that his forefather had drawn up and granted to the forefather of our chief. So it was a nice historical moment to fold into that inauguration.
And you have a story to tell in connection with Mackay Day and the motto that we all know of, Manu Forti. If you'd be so kind as to tell us a bit of that story.
Yes, well, I'll give it my best shot. It's a story that I've told before on our channel, but I think it's one worth retelling and reminding ourselves of, because it's such a romantic and inspiring story, I think. And that's a big part of what we do as Shenanehys, isn't it, Hunter? Is we are storytellers as part of the definition of our role. So the story is that of our chief's motto, Manu Forti, which so many clansmen are well familiar with, and its connection with the badge, which is the crest of our chief, being the right hand holding up a dagger or a skein. And so those two are literally and visually connected. So Manu Forti, the Latin for the strong hand, refers to that right hand holding up the dagger. But the natural question is, why that symbol and why that phrase with a strong hand? And also why in Latin? So the legend is that this slogan was one connected with our people for several generations before it became Latinized. And so originally it was Gaelic lav lacher, meaning with a strong hand. And the symbol of a hand in the Highlands is a very ancient one, used to indicate true family, true descent, true heritage. The O'Neills being one of the prime examples of a Gaelic family using the symbol of a hand to proclaim their legitimacy. The legend with the O'Neills is a very different one, sometimes gets erroneously applied to the Mackays, but that's the legend you may have heard of, where there's a race between rivals in boats to a piece of land, and with the understanding whoever touches that land first, whoever touches shore first, will have a claim to that land. And so as the boats are neck and neck, this O'Neill progenitor, he takes an axe, chops off his hand, and throws it onto shore first. So he technically touches land first, and that gives him rights to that land. That's not the legend of the Mackays, but you can see again the importance of establishing for a ruling family their legitimate hold over a piece of territory. So that's why we have the bloody hand of the O'Neills. As I say, that is a symbol that was popular throughout the Highlands to indicate I am the rightful heir, effectively. So much so that our chiefs, their coat of arms, their original coat of arms, before they began using the one that we see today, was a shield with three blue stars on it, and above them was a right hand. And that they were using to proclaim their legitimate descent from the kings of the kingdom of Murray. But why the hand with the dagger? So we have this Gaelic slogan of Lav Lacher, with a strong hand. But the most famous incident in which that was used by one of our chiefs was in the 16th century. He had, as many of his predecessors were and his antecedents were in struggle, at strife with the Sutherlands, our most famous rivals in that part of the country. So he had done lots to aggravate the Sutherlands, and they had gone to the Queen Regent at the time, Mary of Lorraine, and sought from her a license to go after Mackay, our chief. Again, we can see the creeping north of the influence of English legal thinking that you'd need a document to legitimize what you're about to do. So he gets this license, this warrant from the Queen to go after the chief of Mackay. So they head into Mackay country and they lay siege to Castle Borv, which is that now you can barely perceive the foundation stones of it, and it's just about a mile north of Far. That was the chief's seat at the time, his stronghold. They laid siege to it. He escapes, and finally the castellan of the castle surrenders. They destroy the castle, and it's been destroyed ever since. It's been a ruin ever since. Mackay then tries to prosecute a bit of a guerrilla war in the north against the Sutherlands. That ultimately fails when he's captured, and he's taken far to the south and held a prisoner. So during his imprisonment, the Sutherlands are putting pressure on him, ultimately to relinquish his claim to those lands in the north, because the Sutherlands had their own ambitions for those lands. And during the course of which they're interrogating him. And in a heated moment, his interrogator essentially puts the question to him, by what right, with what claim do you have to hold these lands? And Mackay, recalling his Gaelic motto, apparently reaches across to one of the guards, pulls a dagger from his sheath, slams his fist down onto the table with the dagger pointing up, and says, Manu forti, with a strong hand. That is the right by which I hold these lands. So you can see how the Sutherlands were trying to press him for some kind of English-style proof of his claim to those lands. But he, however, is relying upon the old Gaelic tradition of, well, I hold these lands because it's part of my heritage, and I defend them against all comers. That is our Gaelic way. And so he, again, slams down the fist with the dagger pointing upwards, proclaiming Manu forti, or Lav Lacher. Now, the one detail of that might provoke a question is why Latin? Why switch into that now? Did he say Latin at the time, or did he use Gaelic? More likely he used Gaelic, but why would it later have been transformed into Latin? An idea I have is this. So Latin being the language, of course, of the educated and of legal documents. As I alluded to earlier, that charter Lord Macdonald gave 100 years earlier, it was written not in Gaelic, but all in Latin. So the language of legal documents. So that could be one reason why it later gets iterated into Latin. Another idea, however, is that it coincidentally in itself is a legal term, Manu forti, meaning exactly that, with a strong hand. And in the legal context, it proclaims an action of even greater force than the traditional vi et armis, which is by force of arms. So you might see in a legal pleading in somebody alleging that an offense occurred, somebody did something, and he did it, maybe in American terminology, it might be with battery, right? So unconsented to touching. There was a robbery, for example, committed with battery. So in times gone by, that might have been termed vi et armis, with force of arms. He took my money with force of arms. Well, in the English legal context, there was an even stronger assertion of that, which was manu forte, with a strong hand. So it alleges an even greater offense than vi et armis. But it could be a way to either allege wrongdoing or legitimate somebody having taken an action and holding it against all comers. He did it with a strong hand, and therefore he has a legal basis for what he did. And that's manu forte in the English legal context. It has a nice connection with the traditional Gaelic slogan of our people, which was Lav Lacher.
Chris, it's absolutely amazing. You should be an official storyteller, which I guess you are.
Yes, yeah, I was thinking to celebrate Clan Mackay Day, and the similar notion that, for example, in the UK, one doesn't toast the country, as it were, but toasts the head of state, which is the king. So for us to celebrate us, if we were going to raise a toast, I'd propose a toast to our chief. So if you'll join me, Hunter, here's to the health and longevity of our chief, the Lord Ray.
To the Lord Ray.
Mm.
Thank you, Chris.
I hope yours was whiskey. Mine was.
Thank you so much for this. And I hope everyone that was able to have a great Mackay Day and was able to celebrate their heritage as being part of the Clan Mackay, and those who share the surname, that they can also learn a bit more about the clan. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And any questions or comments, please post below. And for those of you who haven't yet joined the society, I'd urge you to consider doing so to support the Clan Mackay Society and what we do. So please give it some thought.
All right. Until next time.
Thank you, Hunter.